27th. 8:30 a.m. You slowly slump out of bed, tired and groggy. You go downstairs after getting dressed to quickly take a small shower. You walk into the kitchen to find your mother not there, nor your father. You find a small letter from them. You read it over. It reads, "Good morning, son. We have gone into town. We will be back later this afternoon. Love, Mom and Dad." You casually toss the note onto the table before noticing that they have made you breakfast. You sit on the table and enjoy a bowl of cereal, a muffin, and some orange juice. After eating, you decide to get your outdoor clothes on: a coat, a couple of gloves, boots, and your favorite wool hat. You always loved that hat. It was a gift from your father on your 6th birthday. Of course, you barely wear it now, seeing as how you are in your early 20s. You shrug it off and put the hat on anyway. Make your way outside. A small shiver rolls down your spine from the cold autumn air. You slowly make your way through the forest. After accidentally stumbling over a few rocks, accidentally tripping over a root, and coming almost close to a snake, you finally make your way into the forest. You could have sworn you heard something. You think it could have been through your imagination, but you could have sworn that you've heard it. A low growl. You shrug it off and keep walking. Probably nothing. Perhaps a hibernating bear? Perhaps the forest settling. These thoughts keep rolling over in your mind as you continue to walk. You start to feel uneasy as you continue to walk. That noise gets louder and louder and louder. That's when you see something out of the corner of your eye. You stumble back until realizing what you are looking at. There before you is a hole. A deep hole in the ground with what looks like teeth. Through the hole came out an extra large far away. Before you can, the long serpentine tongue wraps around your leg, slowly pulling you deep, closer and closer to the pit's mouth. The pit lets out a low growl as if it's very hungry. As the tongue pulls you closer and closer to its maw, you try your best to struggle against it, but your attempts are fruitless. You close your eyes as you hear one gulp. You feel yourself slowly sliding down the slimy tongue. Each inch you slowly slide, you find yourself getting covered in a translucent, thick slime. You faintly hear a loud burp coming from the ground as you continue to slowly slide down the pit's throat. The feeling of being slowly slid down with a long slimy tongue was indescribable to you. After what feels like ages of slowly sliding down the pit, in the pit's throat, you finally land into a gigantic pool of slime. The feeling of the slime on your skin is almost relaxing. Being frightened, you get your bearings of where you are. You look around and you see many animal bones, as well as some human skeletal remains, covered in thick, translucent slime. You attempt to try to climb out, but there is no way out. A low, slow, guttural noise can be heard as another loud burp resonates through the hole in the stomach of the pit. You slowly sit there frightened. Although the feeling of the pit is most relaxing, you realize that you're missing one of your shoes. It's not like it matters anyway. You were trapped in the bottom of the pit, inside the hole's stomach. Outside of the hole, one more loud burp can be heard as a lone shoe flies out of the mouth. Chapter 2. Where is our son? The mother and the father return home after spending the day in town. Even though they had very little and very little money, they still had enough to buy a little bit of food. Your mother calls your name, but gets no response. After a few more attempts, she goes up to your room and sees if you are there. With no responses and no luck, your father tries to look for you too, but no luck. Both devastated and scared and worried, they ended up calling the authorities, seeing if the police can track down their son. Over an hour went by, and the police finally made it back to their small farmstead. Or homestead, sorry. After a little bit of searching, the police had no luck until they decided to look into the forest where the young boy had walked to. The young man. Sorry. After searching the heavily wooded area, the police found something. It was a red and blue shoe, matching what the parents had described of their son. A police officer was about to show the others the group what he discovered for having a large serpentine tongue grabbed him and pulled him in. A loud gurgle noise came from the pit as it enjoyed its meal. The other police officers, wondering where the police chief had went to, they looked until they found the pit. As the mother and father wait on their porch, they hear loud screaming coming from the woods. The mother, scared out of her mind, held on to the father, to her husband, scared. In the forest, one by one, the police officers were dragged into the pit, along with the others. The VORE hole burnt, enjoying its meal. After a while, with getting no responses from the police, the father then thought of something that he could do. The boy's uncle, or the father's brother, was a hunter, and he knew that he had a lot of guns at that time. The father called his brother, and they both agreed to search into the forest. The uncle, or the father's brother, brought all of his guns, as well as his hunting dog, Buddy. Buddy was a golden retriever, and very smart. As the father and the uncle start to load all their guns and camping and hunting gear into the back of the uncle's pickup truck, they set out into the forest, on the path and on the trail. After a little bit of driving, they start to hear the same guttural noises and loud gurgle noises as the other police officers and their son had heard. After a little bit, they decide that that is where they will stay. They set up their camp, and then they start to unload all their guns. The uncle, armed with a shotgun, his dog Buddy, and a hand lantern, the father, armed with an M8 or handgun. I think that's what it is. At least. They both set off deep into the woods to figure out how to find the father's son. Excuse me. As the two kept walking, their dog, the uncle's dog, Buddy, hears something and rushes off. The uncle, distraught of his proud golden retriever rushing off, he rushes off after him. After tripping over a root, the uncle loses track of his golden retriever, only to hear the disheartening sound of his golden retriever whining. As you can imagine, the VORE PIT used its long tongue and grabbed the dog, swallowing it whole with one gulp. The only thing that remained of Buddy, the dog, was his collar. The uncle and the father rushed after the dog, seeing if they could rescue it. They got to the VORE. The uncle dropped to his knees, devastated that the only thing that remained of his proud dog was his collar. Devastated and angry, he started to shoot in the air, demanding whoever took his dog return him. With one fell swoop, the tongue wrapped around the uncle's leg, and within a split second, the uncle was gone, once again swallowed into the depths of the VORE. Let out another burp, this time loud enough to shake the trees. The father ran back to the truck, turned it on, and then drove all the way back to his homestead. The mother, worried sick about her husband and her son. The father grabbed a peculiar item before getting into the truck. He showed it to his wife. The shoe of their son. His son's shoe. The mother cried and wailed, upset and distraught over the loss of their son. The days passed, the mother growing angrier and more restless. She could not sleep at night, knowing that a monster had took her son. The father reported to the police about the whole. The police had also mentioned that their search and rescue team had not returned from their homestead. Putting two and two together, the police chief, the sheriff, and the father put two and two together. They both assumed that the VORE had swallowed whole the entire rescue team. Another couple of days went by. The mother, growing more angry and more outraged, snapped and couldn't take it any longer. Wielding an axe, the husband, still in bed, sleeping, noticed that his wife was not with him in bed. He went downstairs and saw a picture frame of him, his son, and her smashed on the table. Noticing that their axe that they kept over the mantelpiece was gone, he raced outside, wanting to find that his wife was on her way down the path. Being terrified out of his mind, he once again called the authorities. This time, the police wasted no time getting out there. It was already morning by that time, and was light enough outside to be able to see. After having a cup of coffee with the sheriff, him and the sheriff got into the police car, and they drove to the forest to look for his wife. Sadly, when they got there, they found dress scraps along with the axe. Got to the VORE, more dress scraps can be found, as well as the shattered remains of the axe. The blade still intact, but the handle was split in two. A small snoring sound can be heard. The sheriff, as well as the husband, the father, both assumed that the VORE was sleeping, digesting its meal. A few days later, the father met up with one of his friends. He was another avid hunter, always bragging about how he hunted a lot of deer and buffalo. His friend had an idea. They would take an old vintage video camera and a rope. Their idea was that the friend would be tied to a tree, tie one end of the rope to a tree, and the other end to him. And he would go down into the VORE and see what he can find. If he can find their son, the man's son. After that, they went to the forest to do their little experiment. The father tied one end of the rope to a nearby tree, and the other around his friend's waist. The plan didn't go accordingly. As the man attempted to get inside. He accidentally slipped and fell. Luckily, he wasn't hurt, but he did fall straight to the stomach. He took a few pictures, and with a little bit of help, the father pulled him out. When his friend returned to the surface, he was covered in thick, translucent slime. But luckily, the camera caught amazing pictures of what was down there. When they got back home, the father's friend took a quick shower, trying to get the slime out of his hair. That's when they got, after another cup of coffee, they got into their truck and went down to the police station. That is when they showed the sheriff the horrifying pictures of what was inside the Vorpal's stomach. One of the sheriff's deputies even threw up from seeing what was in it. Skeletal remains of animals and humans alike were covered in thick slime. And what was most horrifying of all was the man recognized in that photo, his wife and his son, or at least the digested remains of them. After that, the sheriff had an idea of how to finally get rid of the Vorpal before it was too late, and before more people got hurt or disappeared. That was when the sheriff pulled out a few sticks of dynamite taped together. The father was skeptical at first, but seeing as how they were relaying all of their options, the father agreed. But the sheriff, his deputy, and a couple of other police officers, they all hopped into their truck and drove to the father's farmstead into the forest in the wooded area. Getting all of it set up, they all walked to the Vorpal. A slow, small snoring noise, could be heard. They all sighed in relief, knowing that the Vorpal was asleep. The sheriff lit the dynamite and tossed it into the Vorpal. A loud explosion could be heard. But the Vorpal didn't die. Instead, it woke up and was extremely angry. It grabbed the few police officers and the deputy that was with the sheriff and gulped them down. A loud burp can be heard as the Vorpal finished that and was about to make the sheriff his next. The sheriff pulled out his shotgun and shot at the tongue, but did nothing. The tongue didn't even flinch. The tongue grabbed the shotgun and threw it. The sheriff let out one last scream. As the top grabbed him and pulled him into the hole, gulping him down. The VORE hole let out what sounded like a satisfied sigh as it let out another loud burp. After that, the father ran away, not even bothering getting into the truck. He ran and ran and ran until he made it back to his house and his homestead. That is when the man decided to pack what he could and leave. He left his little homestead and went into the city. After several months of therapy and psychiatric treatment, he tried to live a normal life knowing what happened to his family. He settled down with another woman and had another son. If I can say anything, if this story had a moral, it would be this. Always be thankful for the people you have in your life, for they can be gone in a flash.